They told her she wasn't ready, not experienced enough, not tested against the absolute elite. But when the king of men's tennis opened his mouth and said her name, everything changed in ways nobody saw coming. One statement from Carlos Alcaraz just fractured the tennis world overnight. This wasn't some casual compliment tossed around in a hallway. This was validation from the summit itself. And what happened next sent shockwaves through every locker room, every training facility, because in professional tennis, when greatness speaks, everyone listens. For years, Alex Eala moved through women's tennis like a shadow, training in scorching heat while others rested, fighting through qualifying rounds that most fans never watched, earning her way onto courts where skeptics whispered she didn't belong. She wasn't handed opportunities. She carved them out with her racket, match by grueling match. What made Eala different wasn't raw talent. Plenty of players had that. It was her refusal to follow the traditional pathway. No fanfare, no sponsorship deals signed before she'd proven anything. She earned credibility the hardest way possible, through relentless competition against players who dominated her just months before. Coaches noticed her metrics weren't just improving. She was evolving in real time, adapting her game, learning from every loss like her career depended on it. By the time she started climbing rankings in earnest, Eala had developed something rarer than power. She had forged credibility, not inherited it. The tennis world began taking notice, but recognition came slowly. Media coverage remained sparse. She wasn't a household name. She was a rising name that insiders watched but casual audiences didn't yet know. That invisibility was about to shatter completely. The moment that changed everything happened during what should have been a routine press conference. Carlos Alcaraz, fresh off another dominant performance, faced familiar questions about strategy and mindset. Then someone asked about emerging talent, about who was pushing the sport forward beyond established names. Alcaraz didn't hesitate. He didn't give some generic politician answer. He spoke about Alex Eala with a specificity that caught everyone off guard. He praised her game, her mentality, the way she competed not like someone trying to belong, but like someone claiming what was hers. He used words like special and relentless. He acknowledged her talent in a way that elevated her into a tier most players only dream of entering. The room went silent. Then the internet exploded. Within minutes, clips of Alcaraz's comments were everywhere. Tennis Twitter fractured into competing narratives. Some celebrated the moment as respect passing from one generation to the next. Others questioned his motives. Was this genuine admiration or strategic positioning? Rivals who'd been on tour longer, who'd competed at higher levels, felt wounded. Here was a player commanding global attention, getting endorsed by the sport's biggest star. Eala's phone didn't stop buzzing. Text messages from friends, family, other players flooded in. News outlets that had never covered her matches suddenly ran headlines with her name. The narrative shifted overnight. She wasn't just a rising prospect anymore. She was the player even Alcaraz noticed. One comment achieved what 200 tournaments hadn't: mainstream relevance. But validation and pressure are dangerous cousins. The celebration lasted exactly 48 hours before cracks appeared. Other players' camps went silent, then released carefully worded statements about appreciating Alcaraz's perspective while emphasizing that consistency and proven results were what truly mattered. Journalists dug into implications. Was Alcaraz setting expectations impossible for Eala to meet? Was he accidentally painting a target on her back? Was this help or a burden wrapped in compliments? Locker room whispers started immediately. Players who trained alongside Eala for years suddenly felt overlooked. Some questioned whether the praise was merited. Others wondered if Alcaraz was playing a longer psychological game, creating dependency through public support. In professional sports, narrative matters as much as scoreboards. And Alcaraz had just rewritten Eala's narrative without her explicit consent. Social media divided sharply. Eala's dedicated followers celebrated the recognition as overdue. But larger segments of the tennis community grew skeptical. Online forums debated whether Alcaraz's comments were genuine or calculated. Some accused him of patronizing a female player in ways he'd never frame male competitors. Others defended his sincerity while questioning whether it could survive actual competition, whether respect on camera translated to respect when points mattered. The pressure on Eala became visible almost instantly. Interviewers asked her to respond to Alcaraz's words. What did it mean? Did she feel ready for expectations now following her? Could she live up to endorsement from the sport's most dominant player? Each question added weight to her shoulders. She answered with professionalism, refusing to be baited into drama, but tension underneath was palpable. The margin for error had vanished completely. Her next tournament arrived with unprecedented scrutiny. Cameras followed practice sessions. Analysts parsed her body language for signs of confidence or fracture. When she won early matches, headlines credited Alcaraz's psychological boost. When she struggled, commentators questioned whether sudden attention had destabilized her focus. She was no longer playing for herself. She was playing for the narrative, trapped in a feedback loop where pressure created mental errors. Errors fueled doubts, and doubts deepened pressure. The weight showed in subtle ways. In matches she should have dominated, she appeared tentative, not from lack of skill but from paralyzing awareness that millions were watching, waiting for her to live up to standards someone else had set. Her serve, which had been a weapon, became inconsistent, not because she'd forgotten how to hit it, but because certainty had fractured under expectation. Rivals sensed vulnerability and attacked her psychology rather than her tennis weaknesses. Behind the scenes, her coaching staff worked to insulate her from noise, reminding her that Alcaraz's words didn't define her value. They pointed to actual achievements: tournaments won, players defeated, rankings climbed without anyone's blessing. But in professional sports, insulation is never complete. The noise always finds you. Eala began changing her interview approach, becoming more guarded, projecting confidence while privately wrestling with questions Alcaraz's comments had planted. Was she actually worthy, or riding coattails of someone else's opinion? This is the true cost of validation from the top. It can either elevate you forever or anchor you to impossible standards. Months passed. Initial fervor around Alcaraz's comments began fading, replaced by new controversies and storylines. But effects remained embedded in Eala's approach to competition. Then, in an unexpected interview, Alcaraz was asked directly whether he regretted his comments, whether he felt responsible for pressure they'd created. His response was remarkably candid. He said he'd meant exactly what he'd said, that Eala possessed special competitive quality worth respecting, but he also acknowledged what he hadn't anticipated: that public praise from a dominant player carries weight beyond the words themselves, transforming a player's existence from private to public, from measured to scrutinized. He expressed regret not about the sentiment, but about collateral damage. This revelation shifted something fundamental in how Eala processed the entire experience. She absorbed the truth that validation and burden are inexorably linked, that being noticed by greatness means being held to standards of greatness. But it also meant something else entirely. It meant she had been recognized as genuinely dangerous, genuinely special. The praise wasn't kindness. It was acknowledgement of her actual threat level. She began reframing the narrative in her own mind. Alcaraz hadn't given her worth. He'd simply named what was already there. 6 months after the initial praise, Eala had compiled a tournament record that validated Alcaraz's original assessment. Not perfect, she had losses and stumbles and moments of vulnerability, but the trajectory was undeniable. She'd broken into the top 50, then the top 30. Sponsors who'd ignored her weeks before were now competing for partnerships. Media coverage that had been sparse became constant. She'd entered a tier of recognition that, while still below the absolute elite, was genuine and sustainable. The actual story became far more complex than one man lifting another player's career. It revealed how external validation, even from legendary figures, can destabilize as much as it elevates. How women's tennis faces different standards for recognition than men's. How a compliment from a male superstar becomes weaponized in ways it might not, if genders were reversed. Eala understood this because she'd lived it viscerally. Her legacy from this chapter wasn't just ranking points or tournament wins. It was proof that she could absorb extraordinary pressure, metabolize validation into motivation, and emerge not as Alcaraz's protege, but as her own force. She'd been seen by greatness and refused to disappear in that shadow. The tennis world now watches her differently, not as someone elevated by endorsement, but as someone tested by expectation, who transformed it into fuel. Sometimes the biggest gift isn't the blessing itself, but surviving what comes after it.